Please remember that nothing we say here should be taken as personal advice. The conversation is for entertainment purposes only. If you have questions about your financial situation, please talk to a licensed financial advisor. All right, welcome to another episode of Future Money, where we talk about the investments of the future.
That will make us money.
A little bit of a different tone today for those of you who are tuning in. No NVIDIA, none of that stuff today.
Yeah.
A little bit more of a different tone, given kind of what's been going on in the city of LA and Southern California as a whole.
Yeah.
We wanted to take this time to obviously offer condolences, offer grieving time for people.
Yeah, we're recording on, this is the 20th of January, and we're in Santa Monica. We've been impacted by the recent fires in LA. I think everyone has heard about them.
Yeah.
And it's really hit home. Hit a lot of,
Sure.
We have partners who have lost their homes, a lot of our friends, clients,
Absolutely.
A lot of us had to evacuate. We have still some people who are evacuated. So it's really been a traumatic, surreal week for a lot of us here in LA, a lot of our clients, our friends, trying to understand what this short-term impact, long-term impact.
Yeah, for sure.
So what we wanted to do today is we invited Dr. Karen Taback, who's here today. She's a friend. I'll let you introduce yourself, but you're a GK client and a GK family member, and you've also used to be in Altadena, so you have a firsthand kind of impact of these fires. So maybe we'll start there, talk a little bit about your background, and I want to just talk about how to deal and manage such a traumatic event from an emotional, psychological standpoint. Talk about financial standpoint as well, but thank you for being here, Karen.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I've been connected with this firm for quite a long time, and I'd like to say that I'm very happy.
Thank you.
My investments.
Thank you.
We didn't pay her to say that.
So, that's very nice. So again, my name is Dr. Karen Taback, and I have a background in psychology. I'm a psychology professor. I have my doctorate in education. I'm a certified life coach and an addiction specialist. And I've been working in this field for many, many years. I currently have a private practice in Los Angeles. And I also am a former resident of Altadena, California.
Yeah.
So after many discussions with Hatem, I decided to sell my home. I drove him crazy, whether I should do it or not, emotionally and financially, what the best decision would be. And in 2018, I made the decision to sell my home in Altadena. And today, all that exists of that home is the fireplace.
Wow. And this is a home where you raised your kids at. You've been there for a long time. I know Bass was there, and this is a. I mean, obviously, you're lucky that you don't own the home anymore. But I can't imagine how traumatic it is to know that place is gone.
Yes. So, yes, amazingly traumatic, but much more traumatic for other people.
Of course.
We lived there for 20 years, and my kids graduated from high school there and then left for college. And I am especially sorry for the person who purchased my home because I liked them very, very much and wish them the best. And this was certainly not the end that I expected for them when they purchased the home. So first of all, I'd like to express my tremendous condolences to everyone who has experienced this devastating loss. On whatever level you've experienced it, because so many people have experienced it at different levels.
Right.
I think it's important to talk about the issues of trauma and grief.
Yep.
We all experience trauma in a very different way.
Okay.
So there's big T and little t.
Yeah.
So we all respond when we see something that looks major, like it's a major trauma, like a loss of a home, like the loss of a loved one.
Right.
Early abandonment,
right.
Where this tremendous impact on our nervous system and the development of our personality. So I just want to say, first of all, that I think that we can't judge somebody else's level of trauma, nor can we judge their response to the trauma. So somebody who perhaps has their home still intact and all the precious things in their home that they've collected over years doesn't mean that their trauma is any less than someone who lost their home.
Yep.
Because depending upon someone's genetic history, depending upon someone's personality style, depending upon someone's history of trauma, we're all impacted very, very differently. So I think the one thing that we need to pay attention to is that people shouldn't compare their perceived trauma and their responses to other people. They shouldn't compare how they're feeling based upon how they see other people reacting. Or
how do you do that? Because, I think innately as humans, you perceive, okay, you lost your home, that's a big deal, right? So that just becomes something that is massive. Like, do you practice empathy? Do you just have to be more aware? Like, what's a good way of dealing with this? Because it's so devastating. I think everyone in the city has been impacted somehow, So everyone has some kind of trauma.
Well, I think that the most important thing is that we need to be in touch with our feelings. We need to allow ourselves the time and the opportunity to sit with our feelings and acknowledge what we're experiencing. Whether it's incredible sadness, some people are going to deal with it by being incredibly rageful and looking at the system and how did this happen?
Right.
Other people are going to be re-traumatized from earlier traumas.
Right.
So I think one thing that we need to do is, number one, acknowledge what's happened.
Yep.
We need to talk about it.
Yep.
We need to share with people. And we need to keep talking about it so that it doesn't get buried in our cells and get into our bodies and cause us more grief later on. So we need to talk about it, and we need to find ways in which each of us can find some comfort.
Yeah. How do you deal with the discomfort of wanting to talk about it? Maybe someone that's lost their home or has gone through this terrible trauma, and maybe you don't want to bring it up because you don't want to burden them with that again, or is that even something that we have to worry about?
I think that in basic social relationships, one of the most important things for us to do is to be sensitive to boundaries. Okay. So I think rather than just moving into a conversation and assuming that somebody wants to talk about it or doesn't want to talk about it, I think we need to ask permission.
Got it.
So I think that's one thing that we can do. Are you feeling as though you'd like to talk about it? Or there are lots of other things we can talk about today.
Sure, because sometimes people don't, or they're just bombarded with people asking them questions about how are they doing in this scenario and this and that. One of the other things I wanted to ask you is, I think, we've been using the word trauma a lot, and I think this is obviously a meaningful event. We can use that word. I think society has overused that word recently, but this is an event. But what does it actually mean to have trauma versus, I think anyone who sees something bad happen, there's it's a spectrum, right? There's shock, there's sadness, there's concern, there's trauma, right? So how do we know, what is the distinguishing factor that makes something traumatic versus just something that makes you really sad?
That's a great question. That's a wonderful question.
Ayal has a background in psychology, so
And I don't actually know the answer, to be honest.
I thought it was a quiz.
It was 15 years ago that I last delved into this. So.
Yeah.
So again, as I was mentioning earlier, I think trauma is tremendous loss or impact on someone's development, and someone's ability to develop and move forward.
Okay.
And it can happen at any age. And I think, as I was saying earlier, it really depends upon that person's internal state, what they're sensitive to. There are people who were born more anxious than other people.
Sure.
So if someone is already anxious and has an anxious personality,
Right.
and someone has experienced environmental issues such as abuse, such as addiction, such as early loss, they're going to be more sensitized.
Sure.
Also, I think that the current situation that someone is in, whether they feel a sense of safety, all of those things contribute to whether one person would be traumatized, which means long-term effect, and having to work through that, or whether someone can just move through that and move on and not have a lingering feeling of discomfort and kind of alienation from self.
Okay. Got it.
I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, I mean I think the long term, right, like the trauma, the long term effects. Obviously, we know about PTSD and things like that, and that becomes a question for me is, are we going to see a spike in that kind of, specifically PTSD from the people who have lost their homes or people who are close to people who have lost their homes, and as such, what do people like that do? I know you're obviously, a therapist. You said you're certified in addictions. I know that when trauma happens, very often addiction spikes as well. There's a dual diagnosis things a lot of times. So how do we help people sort of like manage this? Like what, obviously therapy works. I don't know if, there's obviously different kinds of therapy. I'm not sure what type specifically you do, but how would we help people through these scenarios? Yeah. Where do we start? And then where can we end up?
Excellent question. And if we want to be here for 3 weeks, I first of all, I think the most important thing is for people to have the opportunity to share how they're feeling and to be validated and to be heard. I think that right now, during the crisis situation, I think crisis intervention is important for some people. For example, I know an elderly woman right now who runs the community center in Altadena. She was the head of psychology for LAUSD schools, and she has given for her entire life by building this community for community members. She lost her house. She wasn't properly insured. And she is really in the midst of a major health and mental health crisis. She needs to be seen by a physician, and she needs to have ongoing support. For other people who are parents and people who have children at home, their primary concern is to be taking care of their children and dealing with their children's safety and mental health. So they're going to have to delay the opportunity for getting ongoing mental health treatment until the crisis, the top layer of crisis is over. But I do think that it's important for people to talk about their feelings and at some point to come to a place of acceptance that this has really happened, and they dealing with asking questions why or how did this happen is just going to cause people more stress. So I think if people are accepting, then I think it makes it easier to move forward to the next step.
It's amazing that you say that, because I've seen it through my friends, who some of which are basically still in disbelief. They don't they don't want to accept that this is happening, and some of them already bought houses 3 days later. You know what I mean? So I think there's a different spectrum of how people really deal with this. But I like the how to deal with your kids, because one of my friends who lost his house, he's like, the hardest part of this is me telling my kids and explain to them what this means, because they've lost everything that they have and they value, and they don't have the capacity as kids to really think beyond the material things, right? So maybe, do you have anything there that people can help their kids get through this?
I think kids need to have a sense of security, and they have that with just their parents being there.
Yeah.
So I think the major focus for parents right now, although their heads are spinning and their lives are completely disrupted, is to fully be there for their children and to pay attention to changes in the children's behaviors.
Okay.
It's really important. I mean, I'm just looking at a possible scenario of if a child lost his or her blankie, or favorite stuffed animal, or favorite book.
Yeah.
The parents should not negate the importance of that,
Right.
and talk to the child about that and see how they can find ways collaterally to replace that for now.
Yeah.
And to talk about the child's feelings.
Yeah.
We always want to keep that channel open so that the child can say, I'm so sad, I miss little Weepy, or I miss whoever it is.
Yeah.
And I've been hearing that children are very, very upset about being separated from their pets.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think families are having to give beloved pet family members away into shelters and give them to friends because they can't keep them because they're looking for a new home, and where they're staying in emergency situations, they can't have their pets.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's loss upon loss upon loss for these children.
Yeah.
And as I was saying earlier,
Yeah.
many children have also lost the security of being in their school. Up in Altadena, kids don't have their schools any longer.
Yep.
In the Palisades,
Same
they don't
thing.
have their schools.
Yeah.
What can we do to bring some comfort to the kids? Make sure that they have play dates.
Yeah.
Make sure that you keep them in a certain routine
Yeah.
that seems familiar.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
I think one of the most devastating part of this is not you just losing your house, but you're losing your community, your school, your friends, all at the same time. So as you said, loss upon loss, Are humans even prepared for something like this? Like, are we you hear about loss, but you don't hear about such a devastating loss that happens like this at once. For me, I know I haven't lost my house, but it's just still surreal moment to live through.
Well, throughout history, we hear about people who have survived unthinkable, unthinkable things. Elie Wiesel,
the Holocaust,
and his attitude throughout the experience. I think the human spirit is incredibly resilient.
Yeah.
It's incredibly resilient, and people do move on. But I think it's easiest to move on if we deal with the feelings and the issues as they show up.
Right.
Yeah.
I think if we get into a state of denial and say, I'm just going to kind of bulldoze my way through this, I'm going to get through this, and I'm very practical, there are going to be some prices to pay at the end of that.
Right.
If people aren't dealing with what's happening in their hearts, in their feelings, in their thoughts, in the practical day-to-day stuff of saying to each other, I'm devastated, I'm sad, I'm depressed, sharing those feelings with one another. That recreates a sense of community.
It's awesome. It's really good. We talked a little bit about this before, but can you kind of, for those who haven't lost a lot, but still kind of live through this and want to comfort people or want to kind of help them through this process, what can we do? What can we say? Like, what are some of the things that are okay to say or we have to say without really trying to offend or make people more uncomfortable per se?
Well, thanks for asking that question. Because I have been hearing people say, and I've been terribly upset when I hear people say, "Oh, it's only material things." I think everyone is trying his or her best to be comforting and to be kind and to be empathic and sensitive. However, I think we need to rethink what we say to people, because when we say it's only material things, that's completely, absolutely untrue. So this morning, I was on a very simple note. I couldn't find a necklace that I loved that I wanted to wear this morning, and I was obsessed. I couldn't. I was really upset. I couldn't find my necklace.
Right.
So it's not just a necklace. This was a necklace given to me by someone that was dear to me,
Right.
and I am upset about not finding that necklace.
Right.
So it's a material thing, but there's a lot of emotion attached
Yep.
to most of our material things, number one.
Right.
All of our material things have a history. We remember who we bought them with,
Right.
how we use them,
Right.
that wonderful pillow on the couch,
Yeah.
that amazing piece of art,
Yeah.
that we bought in Paris together on our honeymoon.
Right.
Our baby pictures,
Yeah.
pictures of our go back to our entire life. So it's not just a material thing, it's someone's life things that they've collected, and they collected them because they loved what they saw, so they bought them. Second of all, it's not just material things, it's a sense of security.
Yeah.
It's a place where people have lived and experienced life with their people that they've loved. It's remembering your child's first step
Yeah.
in the living room.
Yeah.
It's remembering the graduation that you celebrated in the backyard. It's remembering all people's jewelry, talking about jewelry. People have jewelry that's very, very dear to them.
Yeah. Family heirlooms.
Family
Right?
heirlooms.
Yeah.
It's not a question of money or material things.
Right.
It's a question that you won't have that bracelet
It's
or
legacy,
that ring
yeah.
as a legacy
Right.
to give to your daughter when she's getting married.
Sure.
So I think the least beneficial thing to ever say to anybody was it was just material things and you can get them back.
Right.
First of all, it's a lie. We can't get them back. It's impossible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
We can replace them with other
Right.
things,
Right.
but we can't get back what we lost.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think we need to say to people, express your sorrow and
Yeah.
express your condolences,
Yep.
and then watch them to see how they lead you into that conversation.
Right.
Be respectful. And you can ask questions. You can say, is there anything that you would like to talk about? Or is there something that you absolutely don't want to talk about?
Right.
I'm here to listen to you or to give you whatever comfort I can.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I had a friend who unfortunately lost his house who called me up. It's like, hey, I just want to hang out with someone who hasn't experienced loss. Because she's like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Like, there is that aspect of it too, where you're just like, you're just so confronted with it and you just want to not talk about it.
And I think you can say, I think that's a great thing to say.
Yeah.
Do you just not want to talk about this? Can we
Right.
go out and have a drink? Can we
Correct.
go out and have a latte?
Yeah.
Would you like to go and get lunch at your favorite restaurant
Yeah.
that's still standing, right?
Right.
So I think we need to be sensitive as we interact with people. And again, we don't know how people are responding or dealing with the loss. We can't know unless we ask them.
Sure.
And many people don't even know themselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think that it's a wonderful thing for people to acknowledge in the midst of this terrible devastation that they can have really beautiful moments.
Yeah.
You can have a beautiful moment with your child
Yeah.
playing a game in a friend's back house,
Right.
and you can say, wow, that was a beautiful moment in the midst of this tremendous devastation.
Sure.
Yeah.
So people need to allow themselves to have a little joy
Yeah.
and to give themselves permission to move on for a few minutes,
Right.
because the problem is not going away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is an ongoing problem for many, many years.
Yeah.
People won't be back in their homes for years.
Yeah.
And people will have to find many people will have to find new homes
Yeah.
and have new beginnings.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think, and that's part as financial advisors, that's the part that we are going to be dealing with for the coming several years. We're already dealing with it, be it from how do I access my insurance policy that I have, or if I
Right.
didn't have enough insurance, or where am I going to live now because the cost of everything just went up. We already had a housing crisis here,
Yeah.
especially in LA, especially on the west side of
Sure.
LA. Where there was,
even
in Pasadena, Altadena, like there's so few homes that were already
Right.
available, and now and were so expensive,
Right.
and now that number is just going to go up dramatically, and this is the burden that people are going to have to face, unfortunately, and this is where we're going to help, and I think we're kind of getting to the end of our time here, and I think we went through a lot of really good stuff. I loved what you said about it's okay to have good moments in the times where you're sad. You don't have to be sad all the time. You don't have to be upset all the time.
Yeah.
Even as the people who weren't directly affected, didn't lose their homes, we also feel like we need to be sad for others all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And it's nice to have that break. But on a positive note, to see some of the stuff that's been happening, I think one of the things I've been focusing on a lot is just watching the tremendous outpour of help from everybody.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that is really kind of gives me some hope, right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone talks about LA people don't care about other LA people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the
Or how divided the country is, or how everyone hates everyone, or how everyone and like you read online stuff and you listen to politicians and CEOs talk and things like that. And in the end, like when stuff goes wrong, it's your community, it's the people around you that galvanize around you.
Yeah.
And people in this office who ran to help people. It's just out of the fire, people rise again.
Some beautiful moments.
There's some beautiful moments, and I think that's one of the things we try to help people focus on, and obviously I'm sure that you're going to try to help people focus on.
No, actually, thank you. I know you offered also to offer some free counseling for some people who are going through this. I know you're doing this already. So, I mean, I think everyone is trying to help however they can. We're trying to give free financial planning and advice to people who are there. We're trying to be there for our clients who are going through it. You can't, it's just such a huge catastrophe that hopefully you planned ahead of time and have the proper insurance and so forth. But it's just such a big thing that it's really impossible to plan for something like this, right? So, so I think for us, it's good that we're able to do our part and talk about this, and hopefully you can bring some joy to some of our friends and some of the people that we know that are really suffering a lot more than we have.
And I'd love to end it with, unless you have something else to add, I'd love to end with what you said, which is the triumph of the human spirit. In the end, people are resilient no matter what atrocities they go through. This is a tremendously hard time for a lot of people, but the resilience of the human spirit. We talked about children, the resilience of children and their adaptability, and just. In the end, we can overcome so much, but we need help.
Yep.
And I think that was your point this whole time is just reach out, ask them what's going on.
What other resources should people go to?
Well, I think one of the most important things is that people should feel that they have a right to ask for support.
Yeah.
Many people are very independent. Many people are very private. They don't want to ask for support. But I think that's the way that people are going to get through this. Community is incredibly important.
Yep.
And new communities are emerging now as a result of this silver lining of people showing up for other people. So people are making new friends.
Yep.
People are meeting people who have new resources for them. And I think that's the most important thing, for people not to feel as though they're alone, not to feel isolated, that there are many places to reach out to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I would say. I think that there are so many free resources now.
Yep.
You know, I'm seeing in the pet world, so many people are fostering pets.
Yeah.
So many people are adopting pets. So many therapists are giving free services. You're
Right.
giving great financial services. I suspect that probably in a short time, you're going to have an amazing resource list for your clients.
We actually,
Yeah,
thank
we
you for the
actually do
plug. We actually, the team has stepped up big time. Day one, we amassed a ton of resources. We built this guide for all of those impacted. Either you lost your home or you haven't, or whatever. So we have all the resources that you need to go to. We're obviously been here answering questions, talking to people, trying to understand insurance laws in a way that we've never got as deep in it as we have. And also just being supportive, right? Being there just to be someone to listen, to speak to, you know? So
Yeah, you know, it's funny because we talked about my background being in counseling and psychology, and whenever I meet a new client, I always tell them, listen, my job is 50% therapist, 50% money manager, and that's obviously never been more true than now. And I've had clients call me and just want to talk, have nothing to do. They didn't even lose their houses. They just want to talk about what's going on here, and you know, what we do is not too unlike therapy in a way that people come to us to talk about problems. Obviously, we don't treat them like therapists do, but people come to us to talk about this kind of stuff, and we are going to continue to provide resources. We're going to continue to provide not just financial, but mental health resources for people. You know, like you said, fostering, all this kind of stuff. Anything people need, we're here for them.
And I think we'll probably close with that. We'll add the resource guide on our show notes and our emails. But ultimately, I think people just need to reach out and talk to their friends.
Well, make sure to put me on your resource list.
You are going to be there.
So, and the other thing, the last thing I'd like to say is, because I've worked so long in the addiction community, I think for people who have had prior issues with addiction, I think you need to be particularly sensitive to what's happening right now. Make sure that you get to that you connect to your community, whatever that community may be, and take advantage of all the resources that are available. This is a time, trauma is the basic foundation for addiction. And as the trauma levels rise, people are going to have probably a greater notion that maybe using a substance will be able to calm them down. So we don't want people to be starting to use substances when they can choose other alternatives right now. And there are lots of resources available.
That's great advice. Obviously, it's a tough time, and we'll close it at that. Thank you, Dr. Taback, for being here and offering your resources and your help. And thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.